This is the North Miami Planning Commission for Tuesday, May 7th, 2019 at 7 p.m. Meeting in council chambers. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Roll call the board members, please.
Chair Kevin Seifried.
Present.
Vice Chair Charles Ernst.
Present.
Commissioner Kenny Each. Commissioner Jason James.
Here.
Commissioner Bob Pashan.
Here.
Commissioner Michael McDermott. Commissioner Melton Goodwin.
Where did he go? Well,
We have quorum.
yes, he seems to have stepped away, but I don't doubt he'll return at some point. All right. I trust you've all read the minutes of March 5th, 2019. The chair will call for a motion to approve.
So move. Second.
Motion made by Mike, seconded by Bob Pashan. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. Thank you for the copy, and I have a blue ink pen, so that will be good. Okay. Thank you. Here he is. Yes. Very good. Thank you. All right. Do we have any amendments to the agenda, by the way?
No, sir, not from staff.
No amendments. Very good. Any communications? No?
No,
All
sir.
right. We have no continued public hearings, so we go item 5. PC 5-19.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before we call the item, because some of these items are quasi-judicial, we have a standard statement that I would read into the record.
Please do.
And then the board members would do disclosures for any communications that there have been from interested parties.
Fine. Very
And if I
good.
need
Go
to
ahead.
explain that, I'll go ahead and do that. So, please be advised that some of the following items on the agenda are quasi-judicial in nature. The applicant or duly authorized agent for the applicant must be present. In some cases, it's the city. If no representative is present, the application will be tabled to the next next Planning Commission meeting. When the petition is announced, the applicant or his or her agent shall approach the microphone and state his or her name and address for the record. Any interested party wishing to speak on any item may approach the podium after the board has opened the public hearing. Each party shall approach the microphone and state his or her name and address for the record, and shall address his or her comments to the board. Each party shall speak for not more than 2 minutes in order to provide for order and time for other interested parties to address their concerns and comments to the board. So, in quasi-judicial matters, ex-parte communications are permitted, but if they occur, they are required to be disclosed. So, review of the agenda reveals that only PC 8-19 is a legislative item. The other items are in, at least in my opinion, quasi-judicial. So if you had contact with anyone, and hopefully other than board members, you should disclose who the contact was with and just the subject matter of the contact.
The only contact I had was a briefing by the city planner.
That's fine.
I received an email that someone was trying to reach me, and that person never did. I do know the person who was trying to reach me, but I have not contacted her or responded to her email.
Gary, this is for 919.
All of the items we'll do collectively, so if you have had any contact, we'll just make all of those disclosures at this point.
Anything on the agenda?
Yes, except for 8-19, which is the height definitions, which would consider a legislative item because it's citywide.
On the 519 Johnson Wales Master Plan, I met with the president of the university, Dr. Rice, Ms. Marie, and the staff. I think we met on 2 or 3 occasions. I'm their neighbor. We talked about it.
That's fine.
Okay. I met with the city planner.
It's fine.
My only conversations were with staff.
It's fine.
Yeah, what about the email I think that we all received about PC 9-19.
Yeah, it was probably put in the record, so that's fine.
Okay.
Well, I did not get that one.
That's fine, too.
Should we read this into the record?
Yes, sir,
Is-
that's the point for tonight, is I need for you to read that into the record.
Gary, you said 819 is legislative, it's not,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, citywide.
All right, so we're going with PC 5-19. All right, and this email we're talking about pertains to which item?
That would be for the next item, 619.
619,
and- no,
okay.
Yes, and 719.
All right, so we'll read that when we get to it. All right. A resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, approving an amendment to the previously approved Johnson & Wales University Master Campus Development Plan in accordance with the requirements set forth in City Administrative Regulation number 09-18, providing for an effective date and for all other purposes. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Chair and Commission members. For the record, Debbie Love, City Planner. This item is for Johnson & Wales University Campus Master Plan, and I have a brief presentation, and the applicant is here tonight, and they also have a presentation. So this request is actually a resolution approving the campus master plan. Florida statute requires that universities have to prepare and adopt a campus master plan every 5 years. And our city, we have a set of administrative regulations that govern the process for what has to go into the campus master plan, as well as the process by which it functions through the approval process. So in this case, they've had campus master plans before that have been amended. This is now the third amendment to the campus master plan. And really what's changed, and they'll talk in more detail, is they are proposing a new 9-story, 250-bed Palm Gardens Residence Hall. They have a new 9-story Biscayne Commons 2, which is a residence hall. Or they would have Biscayne Commons 1. This would be Biscayne Commons 2. They are doing a new 3-story student services and academic building, which is what you see up on the screen there in that picture. They have a greenhouse, which is to support their hospitality program, and a new soccer field, and they're going to do some upgrades to a practice field. The next steps for this is it's going to City Council on June 25th, and then within 9 months after they go back and get their campus master plan adopted by their Board of Regents, then they'll come back with a development agreement. That has to go through our process. That again goes back to you all and back to City Council again, and those dates we'll establish those after down the road as it occurs. So that's the end of my presentation, and I do know that the applicant is here and they have a brief presentation as well.
All right, thank you. Please step forward, state your name for the record and your position with the university.
Thank you. My name is Larry Rice. I'm the campus president of Johnson & Wales University's North Miami campus.
Your PowerPoint is up there. Let me open it for you.
Thank you. As she's opening that up, I'll begin the presentation by providing a brief background. Yes, if you could, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry, sir.
No, it's quite all right. Thank you. As they're preparing it, I can begin in the interest of time to keep you on schedule. For those who are not familiar with Johnson & Wales, I do want to provide just a glimpse of our background and our history. For those of you who know, you know that Johnson & Wales has been around, and thank you so much, has been around as a university system since 1914. We were founded in 1914 in Providence, Rhode Island. So the university has had a rich history in Providence, Rhode Island, Charleston, South Carolina, Denver, Colorado, and in 1992 we opened up a campus in North Miami. So we're excited to be in North Miami. We have a 28-acre footprint. And throughout our evolution since 1992, we've been very excited to have hosted now 3 academic buildings, 7 resident halls, and 1 student center. The campus has roughly a little under 1,400 students. And those are all full-time matriculating students, a little under 1,400, half of which are from Florida. And so we're very proud to host so many students from the Florida community. 57% of those students reside on campus, and they call North Miami, the city of North Miami, their home. And we're excited about that because not only are they here for 4 years, but many of our students will now continue to pursue our graduate degrees and stay an additional year. So many of them are here for 5 years, and we're excited about that as well. And I won't go through everything on here, but I must note that the campus has been recognized nationally on many fronts. I received an email today that one of our graduates from the North Miami campus, which is a testament to the city, his name is Vish Witch Batts, is a James Beard Award winner. That was just announced this week, and that is huge because it transcends the United States and goes abroad as well. And that's something that's a testament to the richness of what students experience at the North Miami campus. We have been ranked by the Wall Street Journal as #1 in diversity for the South. That means of all the universities in the South region of the United States, the North Miami campus of Johnson & Wales is ranked #1. And that's a big deal. We take great pride in it because the Wall Street Journal first vetted it, and they used the IPEDS results, which every university has to comply with through federal regulations. And they have used true data to determine that the North Miami campus of Johnson & Wales is an environment that not only promotes diversity for its students, but for its staff, and we create an environment that promotes diversity and inclusion. And that's something that we take great pride in because not only are we #1 in the South, we are ranked #3 in the nation. Wow. And that is not speaking of just Johnson & Wales, it's specific to the North Miami campus. And what we are excited about with that is all the promo that has gone out for that. And even when the Wall Street Journal published its findings, they were very specific and explicit in saying that it's not Florida, it's not Miami, it's the city of North Miami. And that's something that we take great pride in. We're also known as a tree campus because of our edible landscape, and we have received the Presidential Award from the United States President over a number of years for the 30,000 community service hours that we commit each year to our community. And that's something that not only involves our students, but involves our faculty and our staff as well as myself. And we take great pride in that. We're also excited and proud, and we know that our economic impact is strong, but we are also equally pleased that our community impact is just as strong. And so we do take great pride in knowing that in 1992, I started at Johnson & Wales in 1993. And as a young professor in 1993, when I came to the campus, it was not the environment that we see today. I, along with many of my colleagues, were a little bit taken aback by the lack of lighting and the lack of sidewalks and what appeared to be influx of 911 calls to North Miami PD, but we've seen over the years how that has transformed. And I think that the North Miami PD would also testify that the university has been quite critical in the reduction, the marked difference in reduction of the number of 911 calls to the city from our footprint. And so we believe that that has made a tremendous impact, not only on our students and staff and faculty, but on the community as well. We pride ourselves in seeking to create a campus that is coherent, that people, when they see it, when they're on campus, they recognize it as a university, not as a vocational school, but as a true college campus that is collegial, and that is what we've been focusing on. And what I wanted to impress upon the community when I met with the community to talk about our master plan, I wanted them to know that we have a 28-acre footprint. It is not our intention to expand beyond that. We have no plans to expand beyond that. This is our footprint. My priority and the campus's priority is to continue to enhance and really take care of the footprint that we have. That's our focus. We want to invest funds in the property that we have to make sure that it continues to look beautiful, that it continues to contribute to the city at large, and that when people walk on the Johnson & Wales campus, they take great pride not only in our university's center, but that they also take pride in being a part of the city of North Miami. So these are just renditions This was what I saw when I first came to North Miami, when I first came to Johnson Wales University in 2006. It really didn't look much different in 1992. That was Northeast 17th Avenue. And today, this is what Northeast 17th Avenue looks like. It looks more collegial. It looks like a college campus. We take great pride in it. If you can go back one slide. Go back. This is what it feels like when students are now walking on campus. They feel like they're walking on a college campus that is safe. And that's something that we do take pride in, and we try to emphasize it with parents, because back in 1992, we would spend most of our time convincing parents that the campus was safe. Now that conversation has diminished significantly, and we're excited about that. We believe that it is a part of the conversations that we've had over the years, working in conjunction with North Miami PD to help us in terms of making sure our security structure, which is 24 hours a day security, that we're tight, that we're effective, and that we're responsive, and we do believe that that partnership has helped us to solidify that. Now the landscape looks like this across the campus. We go around campus, students now when they're parking, and they're going out of class late at night, graduate students who are leaving campus at night, they see that the sidewalks are lit, they see that the parking lots are lit, they feel much safer than it before. In the past, they would have to get a shared ride, or we would have a shuttle take them to their cars. Now we don't have to do that. They now feel like they're at home, and we take great pride in that. This was Biscayne Commons back in 2006, which wasn't bad, but this is Biscayne Commons now. And so again, our priority is to look at our footprint, look at the spaces that we currently have, and continue to invest and reinvest in those spaces to make sure that they're up to code, that they look good, that they are excellent. And right now, we have 7 resident halls. I can't say that each of those 7 resident halls are at the standard that we'd like them to be at, so we're going to continue to invest in them, and we're continuously reevaluating them and assessing them. This is the University Center back in 2012. It was nice, but this is the University Center today. It is something that we can all take great pride in now. We continue, again, to invest in it. And this was the old Village Tower Apartments. Many of you may remember them. That was, as can be affirmed by North Miami PD. You go back through those records. That was one of the hot spots for 911 calls. But yet, it was right there in our footprint. And across from it was an abandoned, dilapidated trailer park. We've been able to clean all of that up over time, and we take great pride in it. We believe that it's a part of the university's success story, but we believe that it's a part of North Miami's success story equally. What I'm going to do now is introduce our consultant who works with Sasaki, major architectural firm out of Boston, but they've done great work in Florida. They've worked with FSU. They've worked with the University of South Florida. They've done work at Biscayne. They know South Florida. So I'm going to ask Ms. Katia Lucic if she'd come forward and share a little bit about the specifics of the master plan, and it will be brief.
Thanks. So as Dr. Rice mentioned, a lot of these buildings that they are here on the master plan, and you can see the drawing of the master plan, and you can rotate yourself. They are very old buildings. So everything that will happen in long-term future, I don't think so any of these buildings will happen in short-term future, will happen as these old buildings will need it to be replaced. As we know, we know that, as Dr. Rice mentioned, you already started replacing some of the buildings, but in the next 5 to 10 years, for example, Palm Gardens, that you know that they are here in the area where now you can see.
Please stay in front of the microphone, or we won't be heard on the.
Sorry, good. So you can see this area here. These are very old housing that was there since '92, and it's already coming to the end of its age, and it's very difficult to make future repairs, and investment would be prohibited to work on those. So I think it would be much better to build a new building. So this is what you see here in the pink. The other building is additional building across Biscayne, what we call Biscayne 2, and this is another 250 beds that eventually would come in 10 to 15 years. Johnson & Wales is not really growing I think a lot of universities here are really, and colleges are really trying very hard to keep their students and giving them opportunity to live on the campus and not compete with the developers outside of the market is something that will create need for these housing projects, that is residential halls. And the third thing is also that you see here at the corner of Northeast 130th Street, it's a new academic building. And it's really on that particular space because this is the kind of area that will become a new gateway from the campus. We have a gateway from the Biscayne, and this will be another gateway to the campus from the north. And also, again, as new colleges they just opened 2 new colleges, and as the new infrastructure would be needed to support these new programs, it's going to be very important to have different type of classrooms, and that may happen in the future. So this is really just to have a place in this master plan in case they need to do something in next 10 to 15 years. The only thing that may happen sooner is a small building that we can see on Emerald Drive, the small pink building. There is an empty lot with 8 parking spaces. And just to have a nicer look, they are planning to do another greenhouse that's going to be in that place instead of the parking lot along that street. So this is the major developments that will happen. And the slides here, as you can see, they are really, as the streets are positioned along the, we can see these new buildings, they are really coming to the edge of the street. They are really forming a nice courtyards and landscape for the future. And Johnson & Wales will continue to build and develop their campus. I think that's it for today.
Thank you very much. Dr. Rice?
Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this is invited to step forward. Calling once, calling twice, and there appears to be no public inquiry, so we will close the public hearing. Time for commission discussion or questions, and if not, then we'll call for a motion to move the item.
I have one question, if I can. I'm a little confused on this, Dr. Rice or Ms. Marie. We have, it says, the addition of the student service and academic building as proposed, 3-story, 45-foot tall, 65,000 square foot building. Okay, you were going to put that in where the current soccer field is, right, or the Arch Creek field?
We were originally going to put it there.
Okay, then it goes on to say, or the combined sites of Arch Creek Parking Lot and Arch Creek Residence Hall.
Yes.
Is that the one off of 16th Avenue?
That is.
Okay, so you're thinking of moving the building over
Yeah,
there?
we are.
Okay, all right. The only thing, so you're not sure if you're going to put it in
We're
that field
not.
like we had
We're,
discussed?
we're not, and so we would definitely open up for more discussion, and we'd have an architect
Okay.
take a look at it. And what we need more than anything is the money.
I can't help you there.
Okay.
Okay, well, the only thing I would ask is that would fit, the footprint would fit right in the field, so we wouldn't destroy any of the greenery that we had there, the trees and all that stuff on the canal. That would stay. We would have that buffer.
That is true.
And then you would have the
That is true.
building.
That is true.
Okay.
Mhm.
The only other thing I would say, if you're going to put it there, if we do eventually put it there, which I don't know when, we use type of glass that would not be reflective at night.
Agreed.
Okay, and that's it. Otherwise, you guys have been great neighbors, and thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful job you've done for the city, and you did reduce crime substantially. I can remember Lakeside, Emerald Lake Apartments, when I was the chief of police. We were there 600-700 times a year. The other, what the heck was that dump you ripped down over there?
Yep.
Amazing. Amazing how you transformed that neighborhood. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question, if I can. Do you have, you've done a wonderful job beautifying your campus and make the whole area look a lot nicer. Do you have any short-term plans to do something with the lot that's going to become your soccer field? I mean, it's kind of become a little bit of a dump site.
We do,
And-
we do. We have plans. We have we have very lofty goals, and we were hoping that some of those plans would have been discussed today. However, it just didn't solidify. So we do have intentions. Where we have, I should say, opposing priorities, and it's whichever one, and all of them are equally important. So we would love for it to enrich student life by having a soccer field there if possible. We've entertained that. We've even had
Or maybe a
conversations.
sidewalk,
Well,
something.
that would come with it. So regardless of what we were to do with it, a sidewalk would be a part of that.
So that's down the road, though.
It is. And I would just note that all of the sidewalks that you see currently in place, and there are quite a few, we actually invested those 100%. Those did not require any taxpayer monies. The university invested in it. It does cost an awful lot. So if we
Okay.
had more funds, we would do that, but we just don't at the time.
Mr. Ernst.
Dr. Rice, your gateways were noted as 130th Street, coming off of Biscayne. Also, I believe Northeast 127th, is that correct?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Those gateways will remain open to access to vehicle traffic, and also residents that want to go back and forth to get to those buildings and to Publix. You don't anticipate any plans to shut that off, do you?
We have no plans for any additional street closures. The street closures that have taken place were all a part of
Right.
of assessment of the campus footprint, and it all spoke to safety. So we were only focused on student safety at the time when the street closures took
Right.
place.
When you
Now
speak-
that student safety has been realized, there's no intentions or plans to do any or even request any additional street closures.
And the gateways basically are just signs. When you say gateways, they're the signs that you listed.
Yes, sir.
I noticed, I think you've already put one or two in.
And it's all directions. So
Yeah.
when we provide directions, whether it's online or through email,
Just
that's
campus identification.
Mhm. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the university? Mike?
Yeah. By the way, you speak about the Wildcat Center.
Yes, sir.
And
Nice.
I remember the tour that we took at that old apartment building on 124th Street,
Mhm.
where absolutely the worst of the worst were in there, and the North Miami Police Department said they spend half their night, half the force was there at that building all the time. I mean, what you've done to the neighborhood and improving the neighborhood has just been phenomenal. I mean, it's just really just improved. Everything around it has had a real ripple effect.
Yes.
My only comment is on 124th Street, when the soccer field happens, you really need to get a walkway, some sort of dedicated walkway between the parking lot across the street and the soccer field, because there is still going to be traffic on 127th.
You're right.
So there needs to be some sort of dedicated, obvious, this is a walkway kind of situation, so some of the kids don't get run over
You're right.
the way some of the cars drive down that street. But other than that, Mr. Chairman, if there's no other comments, I'd like to move, approval of this. I think it's a wonderful thing and a wonderful thing for North Miami.
Let me just see if anyone else has comments, gentlemen? No? All right, then we have a motion to approve by
Second.
McDermott, seconded by Kenny Each. All in favor?
Aye.
Your master plan is approved. Thank you very much, Dr. Rice. Wish you every success, and may you find some wealthy donors so that your plans can be realized within our respective lifetimes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff, as well.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Everything, yeah.
All right, so now we're ready for PC 619. And this is, Mr. Held, should we go ahead and read this in, or do you want to presage with any comments or the email that we need to read? Or we take the item first, read it, and then anything else we have to?
The latter.
Okay. All right, this is PC 6-19. An ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, adopting amendments to Volume 1, Goals, Objectives, and Policies of the City of North Miami 2016 Comprehensive Plan in accordance with the requirements of Section 163.3184, 3 Florida Statutes 2018, and Chapter 29, Article 3, Division 11, Section 3-1102, A, and Sections 3-1105 through 3-1110 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances, specifically by amending the future land use element to 1, create a new North Miami Transit Station overlay district with related goals, objectives, and policies, and 2, at policy 1.2.1, to establish maximum density and height for the new overlay district, and amending the future land use map to reflect the boundary of the new overlay district, providing for an adoption hearing and subsequent transmittal of the proposed amendments and supporting data and analysis to the State Land Planning Agency for a determination of completeness, providing for repeal, conflict severability, and an effective date. Staff report.
Again, Debbie Love, City Planner, and the item before you is related to, let me get this up on the screen, is related to the new North Miami Transit Station overlay. This actually is implementing the North Miami Mobility Hub and TOD strategic plan, and I'm sure many of you were either part of the workshops that occurred, and I know that you each have read this, so and for those who haven't, there's an executive summary that we'd be more than happy to provide you a copy so that you can see that. It also implements other parts of our studies and in our comprehensive plan. What this is going to do is it establishes the residential density for the area. It not only sets it, the boundaries, actually you can see it's outlined there on the current future land use map, outlined in red. It sets the density at 125 dwelling units per acre. The height as recommended in the study is 200 feet inclusive of parking. And it allows a mixed use and a wide variety of uses that are currently allowed under the zoning categories. For example, in M1 residential is not allowed. So this overlay would allow a lot more uses that could occur within that. It was established through a radii, quarter-mile radius, and it was very specific. The consultant was very specific in excluding any single-family districts. And staff went through and actually tried to ground truth a lot of the boundary to make sure that, again, that it was a correct boundary. So we're very comfortable with providing this to you, as this is the proposed boundary. It meets the requirements and the suggested boundaries as established in the plan. Not only is it this, but it's also in our comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan says you are going to establish a TOD district around 125th in the FEC corridor. And interesting is that ULI did an Arch Creek Basin study. And one of the recommendations is, and something is very interesting, is that right there on the FEC corridor, I don't have the little thing going on here, little light, but along that corridor there is what's called a coastal ridge. And it's actually one of the highest points in the city. So they said that when you do this, you should do a pilot project creating a TOD district focusing on that coastal ridge. And in the Arch Creek area, there used to be a slough. There was actually a slough. And Mr. James knows what a slough is, and for those of you who do not know what a slough is a formation in the ground that's sort of a depression that moves water. and it actually helped to recharge our groundwater. It prevented flooding. It was a natural slough. And of course, over time, that slough has been filled with development. And in the ULI Arch Creek study, and those of you who haven't read it, let me know, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. It actually talks about the creating a new slough. So there's a lot of very interesting things in that study. Even though it was for the Arch Creek area, it really focused a lot on North Miami, and particularly around this transit station. And that's where they suggested putting it, because of the high ridge. I thought that was very interesting. We always think of that as just the comprehensive plan and this study, but no, ULI actually recommended that that's the perfect location for your station because of the height of the ground. So what will happen after tonight is there's a companion item that goes along with this, the LDRs. After tonight, it goes to City Council on 6/11, and then it will get transmitted. The comprehensive plan amendments will get transmitted to the state. Once they come back with whatever comments, if any, that they have, then we'll bring those back, both the comprehensive plan amendment and the LDR amendment, to City Council for second reading. That will be determined once we get that back from the state. And then they become effective, the comp plan becomes effective 31 days after the state says your package is complete and we're happy, go to town. So this could be probably about
the end of the year.
Yeah, close to that, yes.
Yeah, October, November, December, somewhere in
November-ish, right.
somewhere in the last quarter.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And so that it will come back to City Council at that point. And that's the end of my presentation on the comp plan amendments.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, then, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this item is invited to step forward. Please give your name and address. First call. I see no brave souls. Second call. No one is yet inclined. We have a volunteer. Somebody is stepping up. All right.
Thank you. My name is Gail Kornblum. I live at 12785 Maple Road. Thank you all for everything that you do. I have a question. If we could go back to the picture of the comprehensive plan
Of the overlay district?
of the overlay
Yes,
district.
ma'am. You'll bring that back up on the screen for me, please?
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. I'm assuming that all of the little yellow dots over there, that's Keystone Point, which would make the street next to it 123rd Street. Is 123rd Street still going to be a through street to 125th? That's not changed at all?
No, ma'am.
That changes.
No, ma'am, it doesn't change.
It doesn't change. Okay. And everything within that red district can go up to 200 feet?
Yes, ma'am, as
For
proposed
mixed
in this
use.
plan. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it'll be on both sides of 123rd, all the way up. Okay, thank you.
If the applicant chooses to do so.
Thank you.
All building plans are relative to market issues. We have a second speaker. Oh,
Karen DeLeon, 1935 South Hibiscus Drive. Nice to see you all. And I'm not knowledgeable enough to give an opinion, but I have a question. That it would probably be easier if I hear you guys talk first. I apologize if you're going to discuss it. So what I wonder when I look at this and I see what I'm presuming single family a little bit out, and then I'm going to presume there's something that's 30 feet, 40 feet. Are there plans that you say, well, there's 200 feet here, but we build up to that? So we don't,
this is not any
You know.
type of site plan. This is a broad concept of what would be permissible, what a developer actually chooses to build 5 years, 10 years, God only knows. That's way down the road. This is simply provides
right.
the outline.
but does that mean that you could be driving down the street and we're going to be at 20 feet and then we're going to be at 200 feet?
Well,
Again, it is whatever a developer wishes, their maximum height, they're not required to go to 200. Their maximum height is either 1 story or 200 stories.
Isn't there somewhere in the comp plan where we're supposed to like build our height up so we don't just go low and then high and then that's not something? Okay, so that's my misunderstanding then.
It's all
Okay.
right. That's all right.
Buffer zones? I mean, there's a.
Well, the buffer is a between, for example, the transitioning standards that's currently proposed, and we'll get to those in the LDR conversation.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, there's some transitional standards that this plan recommended that that is in the elsewhere in the code, and they wanted it replicated here, so that if you're adjacent to existing single-family residence, you have to be set back further. So that I'll point that out at the LDR.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have a third speaker? Last call for, there is no third. All right, then the public hearing is closed. Thank you very much. All right, gentlemen, it is time for commission discussion. Do we want to read this email at this point, Mr. Held? We do? All right.
That should be part of the public comment.
All right, so let's get this in. Okay, we'll pick it up with,
Then would we, I'm sorry, procedurally, do we have to still have the public hearing open to read this memo in, or can we proceed after we've closed the public hearing, since Ms. Love has
It's
just
part of
indicated
public
this?
comment, so, and you don't, I mean, I don't know what the protocol here is in the city. You don't necessarily have to read it into the record as long as you've all read it.
well, I have not seen it, so in my
It's
mind,
your
you
discretion.
should read it into the record. After all, this is a televised hearing, and you want to have it out there for the benefit of everybody who didn't happen to come down tonight. All right, this says, Dear Ms. Love, I have been loosely following the transportation hub recommended by the Planning Commission. It's very exciting. I just saw the map. A train and transportation hub in North Miami could be great. I'm confused about the location. The area of 125th Street is so crowded with very little room for expansion or development without knocking other buildings down, it could create a traffic nightmare. Is it possible to put a development like that at 151st Street near Biscayne Boulevard, the train tracks in West Dixie Highway? There are rumors swirling that FDOT is trying to make Dixie Highway a more traveled street northward to Broward County and north-south artery road like US 1. That 151st Street area would be a great hub. The other consideration for that area are the bordering neighbors. City of North Miami Beach and the state of Florida might kick in some funding for any project around that area. Also, I understand that the Solomia development could be a draw for residents and commercial interests alike. Truth be told, that's pretty much a dead zone west of the tracks anyway, with lots of vacant land. There are endless development possibilities, and the roadways are wide and could handle more traffic. Let's face it, North Miami downtown doesn't have the infrastructure to handle more traffic. Let's leave it the quaint, charming downtown it is now. I am unable to attend the Planning Commission on Tuesday night. How do I contact Commission members to voice my opinion? I noticed there are no emails of them available online. Can you forward this email to the Commission members, or can you read this letter into the record? Thanks for your assistance. I live in Broward County and have a business in North Miami. I would love to take public transportation to work. Sincerely, Trish Hamilton, Keystone Point Marina, 1950 Northeast 135th Street, North Miami, Florida, 33181. Okay, well, for the benefit of all you out here, there is a proposal to locate a train station at 151st, in addition to the one further south into North Miami. Right now, neither one is funded. But at some point in our lives, there will be two train stations for the benefit of Tri-Rail. And we don't have any idea when. The last I heard, Tri-Rail has said, well, once we get it open, we're just going to take some trains off the other Tri-Rail to just make this serviceable. And in the future, when money becomes available, then we'll put enough trains in to make it, practical. So we're all waiting. We have no idea. Our job up here is to create the outlines for development possibilities. What will go where and when is all in the hands of private developers. So, yep, there'll be a train station at the 151st Street area. There will be one in North Miami. The advantage to the North Miami station is obviously based on population. We have far more people living near within that quarter-mile radius for a downtown North Miami train station than they have within the quarter-mile radius at 151st. And a station at 151st would have to have a pedestrian overpass going over Biscayne Boulevard, and that is going to cost FDOT a huge amount of money. So that's out there. So, Trish, yes, we see those things happening, but whether it'll happen in my lifetime or yours, I honestly don't know. So,
Can I make a comment on that?
you may.
Yeah, I have a comment on that email. I noticed that that the the business owner mentioned something about FDOT in rumors, and as part of the Downtown Action Planning Advisory Committee, we actually received a letter from FDOT, and they performed their own separate independent project development study, and they studied the whole corridor, and they also identified 125th Street location to be the most viable location in that corridor for a train station. So I think it's pretty promising that, us as a city, we have a TOD study that kind of matches up exactly with what another government entity, another, private firm went and studied and got the same results. So to me, it's pretty cut and dry. I like studies and data. And so that's, I think it's pretty promising that our TOD study also showed the same exact results. So that's all I wanted to comment.
All right, thank you. Now, it is time for commission discussion, so Mr. James, you've had yours. Charlie, you want to have something to say?
Yeah, my only observation of this is remembering the fact that this is Virgin USA's train track. It used to be called Brightline, now I believe it's called Virgin USA Trains. And I just hope that somewhere along the line they get together with Tri-Rail and work out a deal. But as you mentioned, Kevin, we may be long gone by then. I think it'll be years before it happens, but as Ms. Love had pointed me out in our discussions, at least if you have a plan in place, you get their attention. It's sort of the concept of if you build it, they may come. So, I have no problem with that, and just hope for the best, really. But we realistically, it's going to be up to how the deal works out with Virgin and how it works out with Tri-Rail, as whether or not they can come to an agreement and use of that track. So let's just hope it works out for the best for us.
All right, do we have any other comments from commissioners?
Yes, I have one.
All right, Mike?
Being that we're trying to plan this for the future, whenever that happens, and being that there's a lot of talk about new city halls, parking lot right across the street, rather than the boundary ending 2 blocks away on 10th, can we just move the boundary 2 blocks to 8th? Sure. Okay? And if we move it 2 blocks to 8th, that'll put us directly in connection with the redevelopment of our city hall, new parking garage, which would tie in perfectly to a train stop. If we had a parking garage right over here, people could just park their cars and get on a shuttle and just go right to the train and vice versa. So again, I think just moving the boundary from 10th to 8th, as I said, we don't know when it'll ever happen, but at least planning for the future, I think that that'll make it more synchronistic with what supposedly is going to be happening right here.
That can be adopted as a recommendation.
Okay?
Do
We have-
Well,
I have a question.
I got a couple of things, but go ahead.
All right, well, no, go ahead, Kenny.
Mr. Chair,
We're on that end, yes.
on Mr. McDermott's
Yes, sir.
point, I think it'd be appropriate to have a staff comment to provide some competent substantial evidence to support or not that recommendation.
Right, thank you, Mr. Held. Again, Debbie Loves, for the record, Debbie Loves City Planner. The interesting piece with this plan and the boundary and the reason it didn't pick up City Hall is that it was already covered under something else. So this plan, and let me back up one step. This plan isn't about a train station.
Oh, we understand that.
This,
About development.
thank you for that, and I just want to make it clear for the public. This isn't about a train station. This train station is a centerpiece of this, but there's a mobility hub. And so, as Mike mentioned, the plan for that area at City Hall is more of a mobility hub. There are some preliminary conversations going on as to what would be there and how MoCA and the City Hall and all of that works together. I'm not sure that at this time extending it over is recommended, because we looked at that when we were considering the boundary and rejected it for other reasons. So I'd be more than happy to go back and talk with our team about that recommendation. But at this time, that idea was already
Yeah, could you go back?
rejected.
Yeah, would you
I
go-
think we should.
I would
go
certainly
over
do
it.
That is something that could be done next year or the year
So
after.
should I don't,
as
Kevin, I
development
don't think we
takes
should
hold.
wait till next year on that. I think we should vote on that tonight and have a.
Well, we can certainly adopt it as a recommendation.
Certainly.
You see that those things can be done.
What's confusing though, isn't it already part of a transportation plan within that 125th Street corridor though? So is one conflicting with the other? Or if let's say, Mr. McDermott's recommendation would override what's already planned for that part of the transportation, concept within that overlay district? Because that overlay district already has, transportation criteria, correct?
Well, it
For development.
currently is in the, yes and no. Yes to the question that, is it part of something else, another plan? Yes. Is it, outside of the realm of recommending that maybe it would be in conflict? Not necessarily, because again, a lot of this is conceptual, because you're trying to put the framework in place for developers, private property owners to redevelop their properties. So you want to have that mobility hub. So I don't see that it necessarily would be in conflict. But again, I'll take that back and talk closer to staff, a little bit more with staff, because that's in the plan as this boundary currently that has already been adopted by the CRA. So it would require us to do something that's outside of the proposed plan as far as changing boundaries. So we'll definitely go back and talk to
So,
staff about
so
how
Mr.
to do that.
McDermott can go ahead and make a recommendation. So when we.
He can
we-
make a recommendation.
And we can make it a part of our proposal, acceptance of the proposal.
We could phrase it as an item for consideration.
That might be a better choice of phrasing, only until I go back and talk to the consultant a little bit more about your proposal, because there was a specific reason that stopped there.
I did notice that some of those areas are R2 districts, which usually are less.
Don't want them in there.
Exactly, so you would have to, I think it'd be in conflict with that, once you
It would
move
be
that boundary.
jiggy-jagging
Yeah.
around more, and
Yeah.
so we just wanted to make sure there were no residential, R2 included in here at all.
But they're adjacent or abutting.
If they are adjacent, yeah, and that's why there's very little. There's very little, and so we wanted to make sure it had heavy transitional standards
So,
for
I
those
mean-
areas that are. So
So-
we just don't want to include any more.
So the NRO was conceptual, and that's been a fine kettle of fish for us. My opinion of this, because I live east of the railroad tracks, I think it's too large a footprint. I think 200 feet is too tall. We've got to plan development for our city, for all of our major corridors. That's about 110 feet. So I'm not sure why this needs to be 200-foot canyons on one of the only two east-west roads through the city. If I go any place, I've got to drive across railroad tracks. And not tonight, fortunately, but it normally takes me about 30 minutes to go a mile and a half to get to City Hall. And there's no congestion mitigation element to all of this, other than get out of your car and walk or ride a bike. And one of my neighbors just got hit riding his bike down the street the other day, and as you said, riding a bike on 125th Street is almost Russian roulette. So, I just think we have overlapping overlays here, don't we?
Yeah, and some of that.
I mean, we'll just put a boundary around the whole city and call it an overlay district.
One of the recommendations in here is actually to shrink the NRO boundary so that, and move it over. And that's a conversation we're going to have eventually, is how to deal with the NRO. So there's a small portion of the district that is currently also in the NRO, with the idea that part of the implementation strategy is that you move that NRO boundary.
But isn't it interesting? We're so overlay happy that we're just overlapping
I
overlays.
think it becomes confusing. Nobody knows which
Well,
overlay to look at.
Well,
Well,
you
it-
always look at the.
So you can build
the-
anything.
The
That's what it
primary
comes
would
to.
always be.
Anything except a
like
drugstore.
Like the zoning, and then you have the NRO, and then you have PCD. When there's a conflict between the PCD and the NRO, the PCD comes out ahead. Same thing, it would be here. It would be, you've got the NRO, but the NRO allows you to do a lot of those other things that you couldn't elsewhere. So the idea that, as you and I discussed, Ms. Bashan, is that part of the implementation would be to look at that NRO boundary as well, as a recommendation from the plan. And as we talked earlier, the 200 feet is not going to be every property. The 200
It's
feet,
available in every
It is available, and it is as the market will take it. Some will not be that high. And so, while it is available, people will take advantage of it however they wish to take
So,
advantage.
again, as I told you the other day, I think it's too high, it's too tall, and possibly, why is it district-wide? Why does it have to be completely indiscriminate, where portions of it could be 110 feet, and portions of it don't necessarily have to be? I mean, it's kind of easy to make it 200 every place and just call it a day. I mean, it's intellectually lazy, but I think it's easy. So, that's my opinion.
Indicative of what a developer's gonna want to build.
Sir, you need to use the microphone.
He's sharing a microphone. Oh, my
sharing.
goodness.
It's all indicative of what a developer's gonna wanna put. So if we were to have limited less than 200, then you have less potential developers looking at the properties. So leave it at the 200, it's open. If a developer wants it, it's a possibility. It's not, as Debbie's saying, it's not that everything is gonna be 200 feet.
And in this, we have an implementation framework, and as we talked, is that they've got other items in here. It's not just the station.
Right.
It's the infrastructure. It's the improving bike ped connectivity. It's looking at the mobility hub would be for the buses that we have, to be a nice mobility hub here. So, I appreciate what you're saying, and it's certainly a decision that you all could recommend and vote on. This was adopted by the CRA board after public workshops at this height and at the recommended density as well. So,
And that's where we
I
are.
have to defer to you all what you decide to put into your recommendations.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Each.
You know, we had talked often enough about creating a compact urban center. And as suggested, from 123rd Street parallel with the tracks to 135th Street, 16th Avenue over, including Emerald, Venice Lane, Venice Park Drive. And I don't know how many times we said this, but the Urban Land Institute, if we get that station over there, Stacy, you should work, play, and live in the same neighborhood. If you want to travel downtown, you get on the train and you go downtown. If you want to go up to Palm Beach or up to Broward, Fort Lauderdale, you get on that train. You don't have to drive. That's what's happening throughout the world.
Right.
And for some reason in North Miami, I'm going to say since the early 80s, we didn't want anything higher than 4 stories. And when we look around, I look at these buildings back there. I live in that area. I look at those buildings that are parallel with the tracks. They're 2-story, 3-story, 4-story buildings that should be knocked down. Take a run down 125th Terrace. It's disgraceful. I would love to see a beautiful new upscale apartment over there, giving us a good tax base, okay? And that would lower our millage rate. That would enhance the property east of the boulevard. You know what we're afraid of? I look at 135th Street and Biscayne Boulevard with that shopping center over there. And I don't understand why on that corner across the street on the the west side of 135th Street, we don't have a high-rise there. We can't do that because we're restricted. Well, it doesn't make any sense. There's certain areas of the city, and we do these overlays. I'd rather just come out and say, okay, this area is going to be zoned for this area is going to be zoned for that, this area is going to be zoned for that. And that way we don't have to throw a net up in the air and hope that I'm not going to have a tall building beside me, or if I'm going to buy in there, I know that I'm going to get a tall building eventually. It doesn't make any sense. And while we're on this, I spoke to you earlier today, Deb, and I'm looking at this transportation overlay, and I see that there are 2 blocks that are public use. If you look to the south of it, just north of 123rd Street, you see the 2 green pieces down there that are PU. And you said that in the PU district, everything has to be public use, you can't develop, okay? But now that's going to be in the transportation overlay, so you can develop it, right? Well, I'm going to make a suggestion at this time, because Emerald, as I mentioned before, we got somehow suckered into the public use. That should all be part of the transportation overlay, along with Arch Creek Road, Venice Park Drive, and Venice Lane. I mean, right there is waterfront property. Venice Lane, Venice Park Drive with ocean access. And the buildings that are there right now are decrepit. There's trash out there all the time, so forth and so on. That's prime for development. And I don't know why, you know, I walk the city in the morning, and I see it. It's there. And we're just like stuck in the grass. So I want to make a suggestion or a proposal that Emerald, Venice Lane, Venice Park Drive, and Arch Creek, right up to 135th Street, become part of the transportation overlay. And that way, when you went to if you go to the west, you also notice that you have PU also where the school is, right?
Right.
Well, William Jennings Bryan, that's public use. You see the green, it says PU there? Okay, that's in the transportation overlay. So if you have that in the transportation overlay, and you have those 2 properties that belong to Johnson and Wales or public use that are in the transportation overlay, then make the rest of the neighborhood in the transportation overlay. You know, revitalize that area. That's the whole thing. That's the whole idea behind this whole hub. You know, and then the other thing, we talked about 151st Street. Let's say this comes to fruition and you do develop a station there. You don't want it on 151st Street, because now you're going to have all the people coming over from the beach, from Surfside, from Aventura, what have you, and then they're going to travel north on Biscayne Boulevard, and you're going to have massive gridlock. You want to get those cars off of the roadway as soon as possible. It makes no sense to have our station up there. And, you know, folks, you heard it, I heard it, Sally Hayman was pushing for it on 151st Street. I say no. I want to see the downtown core redeveloped. I'm tired of looking at all the dumpy buildings over there. You look at that old Texaco station on 14th Avenue and 123rd Street. You see the old Exxon station on the other side with the tire place. You drive down 123rd Street, it's embarrassing. It is totally, totally embarrassing. You see the old Gulf station in front of the storage building over there on the south side of 14th Avenue. We have to have a vision. And we don't have to be afraid of the future, and density is not bad. The Urban Land Institute said density is a good thing. You have synergy, you have people with disposable income. And when you develop your city, you develop your tax base. And I said this often enough, I'd rather have a wealthy city helping poor people than a poor city helping nobody. And that's what's gonna happen if we keep burying our heads in the sand. You know, we can be like the Council of Trent and say, no, the world does not rotate on its axis, you know, I mean, where are we at? And I've been here since 1970, 27 years in the police department, and I wanna scream when I see it. We have a chance now to do something, and I hope we do it positively, and I'm in favor of this. And I'd like to extend that,
All right, well, Kenny, I think when we've heard from the other commissioners, we can then go ahead and address that as another recommendation for staff to look at and to consider, because we know that these overlay districts are never cut in stone, and as studies develop, boundaries change.
Well-
And you make good points on where you're coming from. They're hemmed in because of their theoretical 1/4 mile radius. But that's negotiable too.
You know, when we talked about PU, what you actually have done is you stymied a great deal of property owners that can't even put an addition on their house unless we change it. So
Yeah.
this is one method of changing that,
True.
you know?
Okay.
It's a method of changing that where they have the opportunity to develop their properties also.
All right, so you've got some recommendations. Gentlemen, do we have others that wish to speak to this? All right, well then, in order to do this, Mr. Held, we've got the core resolution that would need to be adopted and go forward, and then we have recommendations that would affect this. Now, do we take the recommendations first and basically adopt those and then adopt the resolution, or do we adopt the resolution and then go back and adopt recommendations to the resolution?
So this is an ordinance, not a resolution.
Ordinance.
So, and it's gonna be your recommendation on the ordinance. So.
Right.
It seems to me you should address each of the recommendations first, vote on them.
Okay.
And then the ordinance as a package with the recommendations that survive.
Okay, all right. Well, with that in mind, then, the first recommendation that was made, I think, was Bob Pashon's to lower the height.
That was, right, lower the height.
That was his recommendation and his request. Is there anyone supporting that? That's, it would need a second at least to get to that point. I don't hear a second, so Bob, I think you find yourself without allies on that point at the moment. But the chair reserves the right to let you to bring that up again when this comes back to us, as it will. All right, then our second recommendation is Mike's recommendation to consider moving the boundary further west to Northeast 8th Avenue. Now, Ms. Love pointed out there was some reason they didn't but couldn't recall the rationale, so this is just a recommendation to go back to staff and have them look at that and reconsider whether or not that would be a wise course of action. Do we have a second to Mike's recommendation?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Reach. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, aye, that,
And I have opposed.
and one opposed, we have, all right, so
No.
Charlie's opposed,
No.
and Bob is opposed, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor. So, and I'll support the majority on that, so Mike's recommendation carries with 2 objections, okay? All right, then we have the recommendation of Mr. Each to extend the boundary north to 135th to include, let me see if I get this right, Venice Park Drive, and what were the other boundaries?
Emerald, Venice Park Drive, Venice Lane, and Arch Creek Road.
Okay, Arch Creek Road, Venice Lane, Emerald Park Drive, and Venice Park Drive. All right, do we have a second on those recommendations?
I'll second it. I'll second it.
All right, we have a second from
Goodwin, Melton.
Milton Goodwin, thank you. Okay. All right, and Charlie? You,
I'm in favor of it.
you're supporting that? Okay, all right, so
Well,
that's.
let's call
And
for a vote.
all right, do we have, let's take a vote on that recommendation. So Kenny, and seconded by Mr. Goodwin, and all in favor of that?
Aye.
And Bob is opposed.
Correct.
Bob is opposed, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor. Okay, so that. Now we get to the core ordinance. Right? Okay. Now, the chair will call for a motion on the ordinance.
So moved.
Are we doing it with, as recommended,
Yes,
with the
well,
recommendations?
as the two recommendations have passed, 2 out of the 3.
So moved.
All right, so moved by Mr. McDermott. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Goodwin. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 to 1 on that, so that passes, all right? All right, so we're past that part of it. Now, we get to go to PC 7-19. This is an ordinance of the,
This is implementing what you just.
yeah,
or
PC
recommended
719.
adoption.
An ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, providing for text amendments to Chapter 29 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances entitled Land Development Regulations by amending Article 4, zoning districts, and the official zoning map to establish the North Miami Transit Station Overlay District, providing for repeal, conflict, severability, correction of Scrivener's error, and for an effective date. Staff report, please.
Again, for the record, Debbie Love, City Planner. This is the companion item to go along with the comprehensive plan amendment. Let me move along in the presentation. All right. So now this is your implementing regulations. This is where we take the outline, the framework of the 125 dwelling units and the height and the location, and start fleshing out how we're going to implement and regulate this district. It starts with, again, it allows a multiplicity of uses as outlined in the comprehensive plan, and the ordinance lists them out. Maximum 125 dwelling units per acre. The minimum lot size, this is where it's different than the comp plan. The comp plan doesn't deal with lot sizes and dwelling unit sizes and lot coverage. So here we're looking at a 10,000 square foot minimum lot size for redevelopment in the district. So the idea here is to encourage assemblage of parcels, so you don't have, you're not trying to put a little 200-foot building on a little lot, right? So that's critical. That's very important.
You know, City of Miami does that quite often now, you know.
Yes, sir, I know that.
Yes.
But that's not what we want here.
Yeah.
Based upon all the public workshops, that's not what came out of it. It was, we really like to see a larger development come out of this. So 10,000 square foot is your minimum lot size. Dwelling units is a little different in this district. It is, you're only going to have multifamily development in this district because none of the underlying zoning will allow single family, and we don't want single family here. So on the multifamily dwelling unit size, it's 500 square feet as recommended in the plan. The lot coverage, currently, some of these districts have everything from 75% to 80% lot coverage. This is increasing that to 90% lot coverage so that they can get the better bang for the buck. And then we would get out of them through the resiliency process is higher standards for stormwater and drainage. And the setbacks are reduced, 0, either 0 to 10 on the front, 0 on the side, and 0 in the rear. So the idea is that you have that compact development that is all abutting one another. They have landscape standards, so they'll still have to do their landscaping, they still have to do all of that. But as far as buildings and they have a lot more flexibility in the development of the site.
Gosh, you know, I always wanted a room with a view of somebody else's bathroom.
And that's why I said that's the beauty
It's
of the market.
aspirational, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the beauty of the market, is they're only going to build what they can sell. They don't want something that is not going to sell. And this goes to the transitional standards I mentioned after the speaker on the first item. This is critical because you do have up next to the M1, the large M1 section up there on the north west of the FEC line, you do have a single family there. So these transitional standards, as it says in the actual regulation, and if you bear with me just a moment, I'd like to point those out to you. Structures with a height of greater than 35 feet proposed to be developed on parcels of land which are adjacent to existing single-family dwellings shall be set back 25 feet from the property line adjacent to the existing single-family dwellings. And then, so that 0 isn't applicable there. And then, no surface parking lot shall be located within 7.5 feet of any property line. So anybody who is doing a surface lot in that district adjacent to the single family, they would have to stay away from the property line. So there are some transitional protections that this plan recommended, and this is actually somewhere elsewhere in our code, and they acknowledged that, said let's bring that over into here. Because they were very careful in carving it out to make sure no single families were included.
Debbie, I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Was that always M1, or at one time was that, because of residential homes being along there, and I think you're referring to the ones that are on 135th Street, facing 135th Street, correct?
No, I think it's 130, the industrial area is
131st
131st
To 130.
Yeah, to about 127.
But I'm looking at the
Yeah, a little bit further south.
It's
You're right.
131st Street, Charlie.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on, I thought it was 135th. Never mind.
Okay.
Apparently,
Disregard.
for as long as I've been on this commission, it's only been M1.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
14th Avenue to the railroad tracks, 131st to about 123rd.
Even though there's residential in there, like you
Um,
said, correct?
No,
Yeah.
but there's no residential in there. It's all,
All right,
it's, yeah, you got residential across the street,
okay.
but
Right.
nothing there, not in that area.
Right,
Now,
okay.
what you do have on 131st Street is you have residential on the north side of the street.
Right. Okay, I see it now.
And
I
that's
misread it,
multifamily.
my apologies, I thought it was on
No, no, no.
That's not single family on that side.
Next time I'll bring my glasses.
The single family is actually on the west side of
14th Avenue.
14th Ave.
Right.
All right, so,
Okay, continue.
Mr. Hill? Mr. Hill has it.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I'd like to get clarification on the transitional standards, go into it for a little more detail.
Since the question was raised earlier, certainly.
And I have a question on it as well.
All right.
So if you go back to the comprehensive plan, it's part of what you just recommended. On the 5th page, it's policy 1.16.1. It defines what the transitional standard from a policy point of view would be. So if I can just read that for a second. Acceptable transitions adjacent, and adjacent means in our code across the street.
Yeah.
Acceptable transitions adjacent to single-family neighborhoods outlining the NRO, NMTSOD, which is these transit districts, and PCD should be single-family detached and detached dwellings. Two-family dwellings made to appear as single-family detached dwellings, and multiple family dwellings that appear as single-family attached dwellings. Buildings adjacent to single-family residential neighborhoods outlining the NRO, NM, TSOD, and PCD should be no higher than 3 floors. Should. When abutting a single-family residential lot outlining the NRO, NM, TSOD, and/or PCD yards and setbacks among the common lot lines should be equal to or greater than that of the single-family lot. 1.16.1. It's the 5th page of the prior package. Guiding principles. So the implementing sentences that are part of the LDR amendment that you're now considering says structures with a height of greater than 35 feet, at least it starts like that, proposed to be developed in parcels which are adjacent to existing single-family dwellings. So that seems to be beyond the should be no greater than 35, should be no higher than 3 floors. It assumes that there are buildings that are going to be higher than 3 floors. It doesn't create a default that needs to be proven or an exception to a default why you should go higher than 3 floors when you're adjacent to a single-family district. If I was writing that, I would say structures proposed to be developed in parcels of land which are adjacent to existing single-family dwellings shall have a height no greater than 35 feet. That's the 3-floor height limit that seems to be suggested by the policy.
Well, that's interesting, that's a interesting point that you just raised, Mr. L.
And then the setback of 25 feet, if you are going higher than 35 feet, it should be some sort of a sliding scale. I mean, 35 feet for 3 floors, but if you're going 50 feet, 100 feet, or 200 feet high, you have an increasing setback to protect those single-family structures across the street from some large building permitted in this district. Just something to think about.
You know, I honestly.
I read it differently than maybe staff has been interpreting it. It just seems to be, and I'm, as a habit, more protective of single-family neighborhoods.
It just
Well,
sounds
there's
like it was a
language for
bad
that
run.
in the Biscayne Park transitional zone that gives an extra foot for every whatever it is. So the further you move back from the boundary, or the taller you are, the further you must move back from the boundary.
Right.
Right. But I think it's a problem with what he's bringing up is the way that it was written. It's not written to precise enough to describe the graduated height limits
Right.
that we want to come up with.
And
We
there's
we
two
did
issues.
not,
One
or
is the height,
staff,
and
yeah,
the other
right.
is the setback. 2 issues.
Right, and it says
Right.
that it should be equal to or greater than the single-family lot, which is where you get the 25 feet. Which is why we have, in our transition, it's 25 feet, so it talks about it has to be the same setback as a single-family home. So that's why you get that, when you put that 25 feet in there.
Well, what I'm getting at, what I'm getting from this then is that there needs to be a language modification. Is that correct, Counselor?
That would be my opinion. There's many opinions in the room.
Right, no, I mean, I appreciate the direction you're trying to
And
give
the
us.
thing is, you have to throw in $50 million into the project to actually build anything. But it would be nice if we could work that out tonight as a recommendation on language, just so we understand the importance of the transitional area. Do you have a language suggestion, having now opened that door, sir?
I think it depends on the policy that staff and the commission want to implement.
Okay.
What is it that you want across the street from a single-family home? It seems like the policy that's in the comprehensive plan says it should not be higher than 3 floors. Should is not mandatory. Should is encouraging.
Yeah.
So that, to me, says there would be a mechanism to go beyond the 3 floors, but it wouldn't be as a matter of right, which is the way this is written.
Would you,
Shall not then would be the
Shall
proper
not.
term to use, correct?
Right, the comp
Well,
plan
If
was
we
written
just
with a
change
lot
the
of
language, it would be
should
to,
The-
and
to
squishy language.
Well, we have two ways to go with this. Yes, we could recommend a specific language, or we could recommend that the council and staff resolve the conflict
That's a
before
great
final
idea.
reading. Because you're right, you've got policy that was written, several years ago, and now you have this new proposal coming in, and the difference is not so great. It's subtle, but it's significant. But it is a matter of policy, and that it falls into the political realm.
All of this is a
this
matter
is
of
where-
policy that
Yeah.
Held is raising.
And so I would come down in favor of recommending that the council resolve this potential conflict between policy and LDR before this goes into the second reading.
Right, also, staff can take a look at the issue and possibly make a recommendation before it goes to the commission.
Okay.
Right, and that would be because for us to split hairs on words here or there, it would fall on deaf ears, rather than obliging the council to make a decision. They don't have time to read this, they'll gloss right over this. But if we put it to them as, you've got to make a decision on this, guys, I think that would be more of an attention grabber, and that would give staff the introduction to sit down with the city manager and the council members and say, okay, we have this conflict, we need to bridge this before it gets to second reading.
And it's an excellent point, and just for the matter of record, we're talking about 6 parcels that would be affected, so we would want to make sure that whatever protections we can, make sure that it's there. That's the whole point of this, is to make sure that our R2s are protected.
Okay.
So we've got 6 parcels of land that could potentially be impacted, and so we want to make sure that we get that clarity. Oh, it's not on? Oh, sorry.
All right, so then the way I see this as chair, I think the recommendation should be that this discrepancy be brought to the attention of council and staff, and they resolve it before this gets to second reading.
So moved.
All right, so that's my recommendation. Do we want to adopt that recommendation?
I just made a motion.
All right, Mike moves seconded by Jason James. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, it's unanimous. Thank you, Bob.
Well, I'll support that piece.
Okay, very good. All right. We have
Don't
support
ask
of
for
that.
anything else.
All right. If that's the case, now we need to move this ordinance as proposed.
No, I don't think you were finished.
Oh, you're not finished?
Did you do a public hearing?
You didn't do public
Oh,
hearing.
sorry. I thought we'd been through that already. All right.
Well, staff, are you done?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
All right. Well, in that case, we'll open the public hearing. We did take that amendment out of order, but it is for the record. We made a recommendation on that. So the public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone wishing to speak to that is invited to step forward, state your name, and address for the record. Remember, now we're addressing the land development regulations.
Good evening. My name is Jesus Ramon, 12785 Cypress Road.
My goodness, Jesus, I must change my glasses. I did not recognize you.
That's okay.
Cataracts, it's a little foggy out there.
So great to see a lot of good friends still on the commission. So I'll just make one quick comment, and that is that two comments. One is I'm glad to see so many of you still on, because it brings a lot of history. So a lot of you have seen this, been to this rodeo before. I certainly was here when we did it last time. So the only comment I will make, both for this and one other item coming later on, is that this commission has always been focused on the intent of what we're trying to do. Not necessarily in all the technicalities. Staff is great at that, and quoting this, and the legal department is very adept at that. But for example, what you just did, we had this discussion 8 years ago when we first did this, and I was sitting on that side of the dais, and we discussed this. And if you remember, downtown looked like a pyramid in terms of heights. We actually debated this many times. We had open forums. We had all those things around the city. And we decided that we did not, as a city, wanted to have a single-family home with something that was 110 feet. So we used to go single-family, one story, 30 feet, 60 feet, 80 feet, 110, and then there were some other units that you could get. So my only comment is if you could please look at this in kind of an organic way, say, hey, what do we want with development. I agree, we want development, but there's a couple things in there that I see, for example, that we have big battles and got decided. The 500 square foot limit on the minimum size, it's in there, which we all agreed after putting tape on the floor, as you remember at those meetings when people talking about New York and all that. So how did we get back 500 feet here when we know that created a lot of traffic issues? We discussed all that. So to close, please continue your great work of looking at these things, not necessarily from a technical point of view, but what do we want as a city? That's how we arrived at that plan, and hopefully you'll make those same great decisions again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. Nice to see you. How's your wife, by the way?
Great, thank you.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Last call. I see no rising cloud of dust. I hear no thundering hooves in the distance, and therefore this public hearing is closed. All right, now, gentlemen, we've already had one recommendation to resolve the conflict between policy and ordinance relative to stepping back from the residential in a graduated way. If there are no further comments, the chair would call for a motion on the ordinance.
So move.
All right, Kenny moves, Mike seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Bob?
No.
All right, this is 6-1. All right, that carries. Thank you. All right, now let's do PC 8-19. It's 8:30, we're doing well. This is an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, providing for text amendments to Chapter 29 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances entitled Land Development Regulations by amending Article 7 Definitions, providing for repeal, conflict, severability, correction of Scrivener's errors, and for an effective date. Staff report, please.
Yes, sir. All right. I'm playing Vanna. I don't have my Vanna tonight, so I'm playing Vanna, so my apologies. Okay, again, for the record, my name is Debbie Love. I'm the city planner. And as you noted in the ordinance, we're looking at how building height, not just height, not height, but building height is measured. And we'll pull up the PowerPoint. And while we're waiting for that, this came, a lot of discussion and came from a workshop, community workshop that was held, and this item was discussed. Also was a number of, I'm going backwards, I'm so sorry, my apologies. There we go. Is the way height is currently measured says it's from base flood elevation to, if you have a peaked roof, to the midpoint of the roof. If you have a flat roof, it's to the top of the roof. And there are some, currently in the code, it allows certain items to go to a maximum of 20% above that. And so through many discussions with some of the contractors here in the city, staff, we had a workshop, and out of that has come this recommendation that I'm presenting to you tonight. Darn it. Okay. The way this reads now, or the proposed change, is that it goes to base flood elevation plus 1 foot. And in R1 and R2 districts, the consensus of the workshops and out of that workshop was that in R1 and R2, let's don't have all of these other things above that can go above the height. Let's limit it to elevator equipment, not elevators. Let's limit it to solar arrays, and by law, we have to allow the steeples. And we've modified that to say on religious facilities, so that's clarified that that's what the steeple is for. And then we created a separate line that says in other districts, other things, because in commercial buildings, you'll have things like cooling towers, especially on these larger, like university buildings or Home Depot, you'll have cooling towers and other equipment. So, and then the other piece of this that's important to know is that there's language specifically that says that in no event shall any of these exclusions allow you to have any habitable or living space above the height. So while you may have this mechanical equipment or flagpole or whatever, you can't it's not a habitable space, nor is it a usable space for like an outdoor kitchen or something like that. That's not the intent. So we tried to close a couple of loopholes through this. And so staff is presenting this to you today. And I know Mr. Pashon, you were there at that community workshop and participated. And after tonight, it's scheduled to go to City Council for first reading on June 11th and second reading June 25th. And it will become effective 10 days after it's adopted.
All right, that concludes staff report.
Yes, it
All
does,
right,
sir.
then
Thank
let's
you.
open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this item is invited to step forward. Going once. We have a speaker.
Gail Kornblum, 12785 Maple Road. Thank you all for the workshops, the meetings, the time and attention to this problem. I have some photographs of the house in Keystone Point that I think gave rise to all of this controversy. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, the first photograph is taken from the top of the bridge on Bayshore Drive. And I will pass these around so that
Pass the, Marlene, if you would take those.
Marlene, grab those, please.
Okay, when this first came up and we realized what was happening there, the next door resident and I requested a meeting with the city manager and the head of planning. The first things that we were told is that we should become friendly because we can go have great parties on that roof. And the next thing we were told was that if it makes you feel any better, the person in planning who made the error and signed the building permits has been terminated. It's the second time that we've heard something like this. We heard it with the perpendicular docks, and then we heard it with this house that is so enormous, with no setbacks at all on the side other than what they need. The people on both sides of them are living next to a huge, sharp concrete wall. And I just would like to say, when I started reading about what can be permitted on a roof, I researched elevators all over the place. Elevators no longer have equipment rooms on roofs. Elevators today are all pneumatic, and the equipment is self-contained. So I would like to see elevators eliminated from that list. Solar arrays, I'm very much enthused about, but the new solar arrays that are coming up on tremendous angles. My husband and I just did a driving trip across 4 states, and it's unbelievable what some of these solar farms look like. So that could be an issue if you go up for the full 35 feet, if that's what's still in your recommendations, and then go further, it'll be another 10 feet that are, no? Okay, maybe I'm misinformed, but the solar panels that I've seen are elevated on angles. And I just want to say that I'm very, very appreciative that the flagpoles and all of that came out, but I don't think there's any reason for elevators to stay in. And I just thank you all for everything you do.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak to this?
Hello, Karen DeLeon, 1935 South Hibiscus Drive. I've watched that house go up that we're speaking of. The neighbor is here. Whether she'll speak or not, I can express her emotion of how negatively this house has impacted her quality of life. Basically, what we were talking about before about like step ups from a single family to a 200 story, she's next to a square, it looks like an apartment building at this point. And then they built that little room on top, whatever you want to call it. When I thought it couldn't get any worse, it's now painted pink. That's astonishing to me. I do hope that you will take staff's recommendation on this one. Eventually, I do think we need to talk about how you step it back as it goes higher. And once again, please excuse my lack of correct knowledge on things. From that meeting that we spoke of, I did understand that it was 35 feet, period. That was the consensus I took away from it, that elevators no longer needed an elevator room, that one of the problems with adding the solar array concept was that solar arrays now could actually be put up, I'm going to use the word like tiki style, that they could actually be on poles and create a living space, so to speak, create an area. So if solar arrays were going to go there, I would think they would need to be flat in some way as opposed to elevated. And I do appreciate your taking the time to help us maintain the concept of a single family community, because this has really taken away from it. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have anyone else? Jesus, are you planning to convert the rooftop to a religious institution and build a steeple?
That's a whole other discussion.
Oh, okay.
Jesus Ramon, 12785 Cypress. I will just make a similar comment, and I have a question for staff on the actual numbers. So if I understand correctly, you can do base flood elevation plus 1. So let's around the city is about 8 or so 9 feet. And then you can do 35 feet plus another 20%. So Kevin, to use your property, think about you being surrounded by places that are 42 feet high with 7.5 feet setbacks in either side of you on the back. I think those parties would not be as much fun. So please go back to to what I said before and be reasonable. Does it make sense to have somebody build a structure that can be legally 42 feet next to your house? Remember, we're saying that in commercial locations, we want 30 feet. We just had that discussion, right, on the different overlay districts. You have single family, and you can only do 30, but yet for this, you can have 42 feet. That makes no sense. So I would appreciate if you guys kind of think again about the intent and how you want to live, and not necessarily, by the way, just because somebody has the money to build that doesn't mean they're, they have the right to just do whatever and build, 10,000 square foot home. So thank you very much again for all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus.
Mr. Chair, if I may make
Yes.
a clarification. The structure itself will never be at anything above 35 feet if that's the height limit. It's only those components, either the solar array can go up 20%, and if it's a 35 foot, that would be 7 feet. And we had that discussion at the workshop on solar arrays. And if they wanted to put it up higher, they couldn't because it's capped at that 20% max of the height. So in these districts, it's 35 feet. So the structure itself will never be
higher than 35.
higher than 35 feet after you get the base flood plus 1, and then the structure begins. So the only thing that goes above it would, in this case, would be the solar arrays, and elevator equipment, not the elevator. And the elevator equipment isn't the room, it's the piece of the elevator equipment.
What was envisioned as the winch in the old days when they used to pull it up. But
Exactly, because not everybody is using, I'm sure that in that was the part of the conversation we had at the workshop, was to assure that we didn't have elevator rooms going on the top of the houses anymore.
Well, I do understand the comment about hydraulics now. Most elevators are pushed, not pulled. And I don't have any problem eliminating the elevator tower, because nowadays all your elevators use push systems for if they're going up, not 2 or 3 floors. So you don't have any above roof structure on that. That to me is perfectly reasonable given changing technologies.
And staff certainly has no objection to any change that you all want to recommend. This is specifically out of that workshop as to what was winnowed down. Not
Right.
this, not this, not that.
Okay. Sir.
Stuart Kornblum, 12785 Maple Road. Debbie, your definition of structure and mine are totally different.
Okay, sir.
We strongly object to anything over 35 feet. You can call an elevator, you can call the flagpoles, you can call anything up there is a structure. It's not just gravity, it's a structure. It's built, it's part of the building. I strongly recommend that you limit it to the 35 feet and nothing above that. There is no reason to be above that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kornblum.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Reluctantly, yes, sir. Well, come on up. This is your opportunity.
Albert Mendez, 2141 Hibiscus Circle. Yes, I agree with some people that I think you guys should definitely look at the staff's recommendation. This is really a clarification, and this is what I do, I build. And the way it's written now, or not with this change, it's basically you can pretty much get away with anything. So this is only really more of a clarification, so you cannot get away with it again. The way it's written now, you can basically put anything you want up there. So if you want to put a living room and call it a storage room that's 20 by 20, you can do it. You basically can do whatever you want. Granted, the height issue, agreed. This is what I do. Elevators do not use machine rooms anymore. They don't, none of them. Not even the vacuum ones, which supposedly are the high-tech ones now. So that we have to allow certain things. If you allow the solar panels, well, they have an extra 6 feet to go up. That's at 20%. You'll be at 40.8 feet. Really hard to get someone under a 6-foot area unless they're 5-foot midgets. So granted, we still like the 34 feet being maxed out, but the way we're doing it now, at least we have a cap. The way it's written before, it opens up a lot of gray areas as to flat roofs, the way they're measured, because they're not clarified in the way that was written before. So basically, we can have basically a single-story, flat roofs with parapets that are 6 and 8 feet tall and still get away with it, just the way it's written. And it's more of a clarification thing, the way we're trying to at least make a guideline for everybody to follow, so we don't continue to have things like this come through and, well, it's a gray area, and the way it's worded, they can get away with it. It's like everything else. You can always word something to make it to your advantage. Thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Anyone else? Hearing none, thank you. The public hearing is closed. Now, Bob, you've got special knowledge of this, so I'm going to turn to you first. There have been some very good points made. Can you, do you have recommendations that you'd care to make relative to this ordinance?
Yeah, the problem was the problem. You see pictures, and the pictures, in this case, don't do it justice.
Okay.
The problem is much greater than when you stand in front of this thing, you go, what is that? There's a third room there's a room upstairs. And however that happened, you got to go talk to somebody else.
Yeah,
because this kind of stuff has been done in the past. But right now, I think this works in that essentially, as I think I'm hearing, elevators equipment, we've eliminated elevators, and elevator equipment is no longer needed on the roof. So that kind of goes away in and of itself, and we could probably strike it. So the only thing that's left is solar panels. I would be reluctant to remove solar panels. We as a city are trying to go greener, and if we've got people with the ability to create some solar power, I think that's probably conducive. And it still has to fit within the space. Everything else is not allowed. Nothing else can go above the 35 feet. And the sentence that says in no event, I'll paraphrase it, that you will allow no habitation or use of the space on the roof. So it can't become a storage room. It can't become a bathroom. You can't use it or live in it. So if you can't use it, you can't use it. And I think it's reasonably, it prevents the problem that we've got right now.
Okay.
With the height that's just gone out of control.
All right.
You
So
can't,
then-
you can't put a deck up there or.
You can't use it.
Period. That's what we're saying, you cannot use
As
it.
long as, now, let me make it clear.
I'm
That
sorry?
as long as it's under
the
35 feet,
It can be.
you can. As long as it's under 35 feet, because there's nothing that says that you can't, that it's the height. And now these are the only appurtenances that can go above that height. So if they jack it down some and then they want to do something else, so just to be clear, that doesn't completely prohibit it, as long as it stays under that height.
You could put a deck, Kenny, on top of a one-story house.
Okay.
But right now, if you got a two-story house, you might as well have it. I mean, you're not stopping anything.
Right.
You've still got people at that height, but you can't have any occupancy or use above the top of the house.
At 35 feet.
Above 35 feet.
Above 35 feet.
Correct. And the only thing we're allowing with this language is solar panels.
Well, I mean, this is, you're Bailey. I know this house. When I walk through, I see the house from Keystone Boulevard, I believe. I can see it over there when I, by the bridge. That's pretty big. I mean, that's. It's an eyesore. Well, it's big.
Yeah, somehow I think the design review aspects of our city really failed miserably on that one, but, you know.
Sorry, Bob, you're satisfied with this ordinance? You think you
I mean, again, we've capped, the height's the height. We know where we're measuring it from, so that's where it starts, right? And it's a floodplain elevation. And we know where it stops. And you can't have 35 feet for a flat roof and then put a fence around it. That violates your
Okay,
35,
good. I
that
mean,
violates your
we're
excess.
square on that.
So
Okay.
35 feet
All right.
becomes 35 feet, and anything above that is unusable.
Okay. So you couldn't put your solar panel on top of it if it extends? Well,
Your solar panel
you
can,
got-
you've got 20%, which is 7
20%, so your
feet.
solar panel, and that's about the only thing that can go up there then, right?
That's the only thing that can go up there.
Right, so that is assuming the commission
No
votes to
dishes and all
strike
that
the
other-
elevator equipment.
Right, but so that's the recommendation. We would make that recommendation. We take a
Strike the elevator.
motion and second to strike the elevator equipment, just so we're consistent with that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mike, go ahead.
In PC 8-19, I move approval.
Well, let's get the recommendation first.
Okay.
The recommendation is to strike the elevator equipment. Do we have a second on that? That's made by Bob.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Charlie Ernst. Further discussion, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous on striking the elevator equipment. Now, by the way, Mr. Held, you wanted to chime into this.
Yes, sir. So I think it's important to hear from staff on how they interpret the variance rules and procedures as it might apply to this section. So if somebody wanted to have something higher than 35 feet, add something that wasn't a permitted exclusion, or even exceed the habitable height rule, how that would work. And a separate issue would be, is there a legitimate hardship? But you don't have a pure hardship-based criteria in your variance. You have like a
To build
4
a
of
third
6
floor
rule.
doesn't become a hardship.
So it's somewhat flexible.
Right,
That could be a design element too, which is.
What's that?
That's not, if a guy wants to put like steeples on each one corner of the house or something like that.
No, can't,
No, can't
right,
do that.
that's not allowed.
That's
The only
not
thing that
allowed.
goes above the 35
Okay.
feet is solar panel.
Right, right.
Assuming you,
Well,
since
because
you've all
he was
recommended
starting
that.
to bring up variance
Right, because
issues, we gotta make sure
our
that.
code has, every code has an opportunity to request a variance. from the literal interpretation of the code. They would have to prove a hardship, and then there are other conditions that go along with that. And so they would go before the Board of Adjustment, and before they could even get there, staff would, what is your hardship? What is the hardship here? So the code allows that variance process for hardship, particularly for hardship cases. And so they would have to prove that. And then they'd have to go before a public hearing to get approved. If the appeal is denied, which staff would not recommend approval unless there was a hardship, that they could readily prove a hardship. And it would be very hard to do that, because you can't prove a hardship if it's something that's specific to your lot but it's not applicable elsewhere. And you can't prove a hardship that says that it's something that everybody else in the neighborhood is doing. That's not a hardship at all. So staff has talked about this internally, and we are of the opinion that it would be, I never say never, because there are situations that come up that you cannot ever just say never. They have to go before the Board of Adjustment, and staff most likely would be hard pressed to recommend approval. And we generally don't take things to boards that we don't support. So it most likely would never see the light of day. They would have to appeal the denial to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is the City Council. So again, it's a public hearing process, and there's no guarantee ever that these things would ever be approved. And to get past staff would be challenging, let's just say that.
And I respect that, and I think that's good. And Mr. Held and Ms. Love, out of the blue, it occurred to me that there, and this is perhaps just an esoteric conversation at this point, if we turned this around the other way, and the city took possession of the air rights beyond the 35-foot height limit, and said you're not allowed to encroach on the city air rights. That's been done in one of our New England states, in a city, to try and deal with this McMansion concept. And what they did, they gave the local town, whatever the name of it is, exclusive ownership of the air rights over these structures, so as to not permit anyone to build into municipal territory. And that was how they imposed a cap on the height. Yes, they had the building height business, but as was said, you got enough money, you can find a way around it. And so what the city did, they took ownership of the air rights over these structures in the districts, so that you could not build into the city property.
Can you let me know which city so I can go represent some property owners?
Well, I
It sounds
could.
like a taking.
Well, you know, not if they're limited to 35 feet. You see, it was a way of imposing a ceiling on that. Interesting concept.
One
Well, I
question
gotta
I would
explore
like
how
to
it
ask,
passes the
can
state
we
Supreme
restrict
Court.
flagpoles?
What?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Because
Yes.
the flag code says that your flagpole has to equal based on a certain size of your flag, it's then a certain height.
There's a ratio.
Yeah, there's a ratio in the United States Flag Code. And for the most part, you're looking at them in residential districts, many cities cap them at 30 feet. And that's one of the reasons why we just struck it, because it is something that you can control. But the flag code just simply says you can't tell somebody they can't fly a flag, but
Right.
you can make it, you can cap the height.
Okay.
Okay.
And
So,
antenna?
Which antenna?
There's multiple kinds of antennas.
Well, in-
shortwave
in
radio
residential,
antenna,
we
for
wouldn't
example.
have that's why you don't see that in other districts. Cell phone towers are a different animal that we can't control. The thing that in our code on cell phone towers is primarily co-locations. And you'll see that they do a lot more stealth now on these. Instead of the big gigantic new towers, they do stealth by attaching it to something else.
All right, so we have the recommendation on the elevator business, and we've approved that. So now we approve the ordinance, essentially. And, Bob, do you want to make a motion on that?
I'd move to approve the ordinance.
Oh, sorry, Mike. Well, all right. Well,
Mike, I'll
Bob
second
approved,
Mike's
Mike
motion.
seconded, or whichever. So all in favor on the ordinance?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. All right, so we're up to our last item, and it's 9 o'clock. PC 919, 9-19. An ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, providing for text amendments to Chapter 29 of the City of North Miami Code of Ordinances entitled Land Development Regulations by amending Article 4, Zoning Districts and the Official Zoning Map to establish the Special Development and Transit-Oriented Development Overlay District, clarifying the bonus density allocation provisions, providing for repeal, conflict severability, correction of Scrivener's errors, and for an effective date. Staff report, please.
Yes, sir. Again, for the record, Debbie Love, City Planner. This is the implementation of the this district that was adopted back in darn it. This is like, there we go. All right. Back in September, council, you all made the recommendation to the mayor and council to adopt the special development, transit-oriented development overlay. And this is the implementing regulations. So this established, this particular ordinance that's before you does a couple of things. So let's start with the district itself. The district regulations are limited to 200 feet inclusive of parking in this district, 150 dwelling units per acre, a minimum dwelling unit size, again, of multifamily for 500 square feet, and the lot coverage of 90%. And additionally, in addition to establishing the district itself and the regulations for that, it also, we were asked to take a look at the bonus unit criteria. The criteria we had before, those bonus units, many of them were already required by code, and yet somebody could say, I'm going to do bikes, and the code already says you have to do bikes. And so, but, okay,
Right.
so I'm gonna give
So
you
whether
5
you
units for
bonus.
bikes.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a perfect example. Bob and I have talked about that since I've been at the city, that's just crazy. So, at first we looked at modifying the table to make it more resilient focused. And because currently the table, the max in the tables that are in the code is up to 90 dwelling units per acre. So anything over that, there's no criteria for how you would even achieve the 150 units or the 125 on any of the PCD corridors. So we were looking at expanding them and making it more focused on resiliency. We were then asked to simply delete those tables and just take some of those things that weren't in the code, and there were very few of them, and actually just fold it into the LDRs to make the sustainability and the design section more robust. Because right now in the PC, if you're in the PCD outside of the NRO, there is absolutely no criteria for those bonus units. So staff negotiates hard with the property owner when they come in for an application or a project to try to get them to do more things that the city would like to see, more resilience, you know, more design, but there's nothing there. So we then leaned heavily on the sustainability section and the design section. So by doing that, but taking a little bit more robust approach, you'll see that we've amended 5802 and 5803. And in 5803 is our sustainability section. 5803, we had worked with Mr. Pashon and his floodplain committee to take a look at how we could modify those tables and make them more resilient, more resilient floodplain preservation and protection. My phone is making all kinds of noises, my apologies. And so by folding in some things that we felt were critical to us, which is the low impact development and the sustainable landscaping to encourage, right now, if you are on a major corridor or if you are requesting density bonuses, you have to do 80% native vegetation. It's less than that otherwise. So we thought we'd just beef that up to 100% native vegetation. And if you have native trees, you need to the best practicality, you need to work around those trees so you don't destroy our canopy of these native trees. And then you also have to pay to have trees put elsewhere in the community, because we have a tree master plan, and we want people to pay into a fund to actually put trees where we don't have trees. So that's another requirement there. And with that, that explains staff. We have on second reading, we'll have first reading at City Council on June 11th and the second reading on June 25th, and it will become effective 10 days after that. So we're very excited about having this finally come to you. It took a while because we were talking about this whole issue of the tables and how to make it more resilient. And so with that, that's the end of staff's presentation, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Well,
go ahead, Bob.
Well, go ahead and what you want. We spent a lot of time talking about this
Yeah.
the other day, and I've got a conceptual issue that the path we went down, we have a currently what exists is we have a standards, right? And the zoning standards say this is what you must do, and this is what you can do within the zoning districts. And then we have a table that says you can get bonus units for doing other things. And where I think we had a problem, or certainly I did, was that it became kind of perfect attendance awards. You didn't have to do anything, you just had to show up. And we were, you have to have bike racks, so we're giving you bonuses for bike racks. And it was pointless. We were just figuring out a way to give developers bonus units and getting nothing out of it as a city. So the direction that Debbie was directed to go into was do away with the bonus units. And as I explained to her, I think all we did was rearrange the deck chairs, because we said, well, here's things you've got to do, and these are the standards, and if you do those, you get all these bonus units. And the things you had to do were what we used to give you bonus units for. So we just moved them from door number 2 to door number 1, and then we gave you the bonus units for doing them. But there was no table of bonus units. My recommendation is, look, I ran businesses for years, and when I did compensation programs. And with a compensation program, I paid people a certain amount of money, and then there was a bonus for achieving things above and beyond. And I think that's what we want. We should decide what we think buildings should have in 2019 in the city of North Miami. And those become the standards. And that's the building standards. You have to have bike racks. You have to do all certain things. And then what is desirable that we would like to encourage that's beneficial to the city, not the developer. I find that electric charging stations are good for the developer. It's not going to make me go buy an electric car, but if I have an electric car, it'll let me move into his building. That's good for him. If he doesn't want to do them, have a nice day. That doesn't do anything for the city of North Miami. But if we have LEED certification, you get 15 dwelling units. How about you get LEED certification, you get 5, LEED certification gold, you get 10, platinum, you get 15. So we have people reaching for goals, things that are beneficial to us, a more sustainable city. You put pervious material to cover your ground. Because we as a city are trying to fight sea level rise. So if you do that, we'll give you bonus units. If you don't do it, that's fine. But those are the things we direct people towards doing through a bonus pool. So what I would almost recommend is we table this, because at the 11th hour, I'd hate to decide what are the important things we want to give people bonus units for. I think we should look at what we think buildings should be in 2019 and beyond in the city of North Miami. Which of those things do we think are mandatory or required, quote unquote, standards? And what do we think we should compensate people over and above for doing? And I think that's a healthy conversation. It gets the developer to do something that's not just good for him, it suits the city. Whether it's, I mean, maybe it's native vegetation. I mean, every developer is not going to like it. We've got arguments in Keystone Point. We have residents that want to see more palm trees. And so if the developer wants to put palm trees up, that's fine. If he does native vegetation, which helps us in resiliency, then we give him bonus units. Stuff that's good for the city. And I think that's a thoughtful discussion. It's a different path than Debbie was directed to go down, but I think it's the right path.
Well, you know, Bob, I like your logic on that, and I understand that the city planner oftentimes gets direction from city council for reasons we don't need to go into here. But I think your point is well taken. We've not had a productive discussion on how to award meaningful bonus units. My pet peeve with a lot of our current development standards is we're failing to reward or failing to incentivize open spaces within design plans. All of our developers basically want to pave over every square inch of land that they buy, and we're going to wind up like Houston. The water will have nowhere to go.
Yep.
And so in looking at this, I don't want to rush this until we've had that discussion. Mike, what's your take on this?
I agree with Bob. I think we need to have more discussion on this, and I think tabling it's a good idea, Bob. I think it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, as they say.
Because I think, Debbie, a great value add here with you and your group is to go find the things we're not seeing. What are other cities doing to incent people for sustainability and stuff that benefits the city? Because that's what we're looking for. We should be giving bonus units to a guy that wants to build in our town because he does something that's good for the community, not just for him.
And not just try to milk what he can
Yeah.
out of.
Yeah, because they're all going to milk what they can, and it's a question of what we can get out of the deal.
And if we're giving additional parking spaces, because you put in our variance where you don't have to do as many parking spaces because you're putting in a electrical charge, then.
Well, it's a good discussion. Yes, yes.
If appropriate, I'd like to move that we table this item.
Well, let me get everybody else's input before we get to that, okay? Charlie, do you want to speak to this?
No, Bob's brought up a good point about that. This has always been an ongoing problem.
So you're supporting Bob's position, okay?
We're not getting anything in return.
Bob, I sense you may win this one. Kenny,
Could say
do
a
we
long
have?
time coming, but
I don't have a problem in continuing this.
Okay, Jason?
Neither do I. I think
All right,
it's great.
in that case, the chair will entertain the motion for continuance on this item. And do we have a second to that?
I do.
Bob seconds that, and so does Kenny. And so, yes, Mr. Held.
You seconded also?
Sure. Just a thought, you might want to give a time frame,
Yeah, establish a date.
suggest when staff should bring it back.
We'd like to have it back within 60 days, if that's feasible. Now, if that's not, you come back and tell us in 60 days, look, we really need a little more time, and we're cool with that.
That would put us in what, July?
Yeah, it puts us into July.
And then when we break for the summer, in
Yeah.
August, so why don't we bring it back, how about September? That way we have a lot
Well,
of.
we've got statutory issues to come up in the fall. And I'd like to get this out of the way before we get into the statutory requirements.
Because you have 1 year from September 18th to adopt this.
So,
And I don't mean the first reading, it means adoption.
yeah.
When you have to adopt, I'm sorry.
When is it?
It's a 1 year from the date that the comprehensive
So what
plan
is that
was
date, Deb?
adopted, September 18th.
So what does that do in terms of city council meetings? They're gonna be breaking in August.
Right, so this is why this is tightly scheduled.
All right, this has to be in June then. You got 30 days. You got it.
Question.
Yes,
So is it possible, and staff would need to respond because I don't have
of course.
a lot of the substance of what's in here, is it possible to recommend adoption of this so it goes forward with the schedule and deal with reviewing the changes that Bob is proposing as an amendment later on?
That would take another year. It's no.
If I may, if I
yes,
may respond to
you
that,
may.
Mr. Chair?
Possibly
The challenge that we have here with these, with the table and adopting, not having anything adopted, is that as they come through, they'll go with the old table. So we wanted to handle it like we handled the PCD now, is to just say, look, let me put your note, let me put you tight to the, so you want these density bonuses? All right, so now I'm going to put you tight into the design and putting you tight into the sustainability. And now with these changes, I've actually beefed up the design and beefed up the sustainability section because we're handling it with like the PCD. And that was the idea, that was the whole concept of bringing it like this, was we don't have the tables applicable to the PCD now.
Right, and I think where Bob is coming from is the issue of how to award bonus units, and we don't have a clear understanding of that. What I would ask that we do is we table this for a month then, and have you bring it back in June. You can still meet the timelines and get it approved, but come back and be prepared to discuss the bonus issues, because that's not, we're all in agreement with Bob on this one. I think we're unanimous that we need to have a lock on the bonus issue business. And I understand why you want to pass this, and I'm sympathetic to the timeline. And certainly because council breaks in August, this has to be in place by the first meeting in September, which will be hard to do because it needs 2 readings, which means they have to read it in July. And so we have to do this in June.
If it's within a couple of days, either way, the
Yeah,
state doesn't give you a hard
no.
time. So even if it went to second reading in September, it's close enough to that September 18th that they would give us a break on that.
Yeah. So
But
let's,
not beyond that.
then let's table this and recall it in June, and be prepared for staff to discuss the bonus units question. How are they really evaluated and awarded? We're not opposed to bonus units, but Bob is right. This is now 2019. We want to be awarding bonus units for things we really need as a city, not for things that they already have to do. So if you don't mind,
So you don't have to re-advertise, it would be, I think, to continue it to the June 4th Planning
Right.
Commission meeting.
this would go over to June 4, with a direction to staff to come back and spell out for us this bonus units issue and what the criteria is, because we all have certain things we'd like to,
I won't be here June 4th.
you know, I'm big on seeing green spaces incorporated and award bonus units for that.
That's the third one I seen.
And there's some other things
That's the third one.
where I think the city could benefit if we did this. But the carte blanche bonus units, just because you did everything you're required to do, is a little too much of a gimme. And we need to get something out of this. So,
I like the idea what you got in there, Debbie, about the rooftop gardens and that type of thing. That's important. Put the pool on the roof. I won't be here June the 4th. I'll be down in the Keys enjoying this.
but that's a good, but you know, we need to pursue this, getting the rooftop gardens, getting the pool up there, doing things like this. These are things that make sense now going forward. And I'd like to have a full discussion on that, so we vote in a more educated way on this one.
Debbie,
So-
can you give us an update? What happened to
Wait,
the-
we gotta call the question and vote
Okay.
on this, all right? So, we've got a motion, from Mike to table this, and we've set a 30-day limit, bring it back June 4th. We have a second from Bob Pashon, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, this item is tabled for a month. Now, go on.
Debbie,
Yes, sir.
the ordinance that we passed a couple of months ago for drugstores, to regulate drugstores and,
That got changed at city council.
I don't know if you guys know this or not.
They decided that instead of making pharmacies special exceptions, that they took away, they changed medical marijuana dispensaries from special exception to permitted as of right.
Okay.
I just hope that these medical marijuana clinics don't fall into the things like we had with the pain clinics. And there's a good article in the Wall Street Journal the other day about, I think, Colorado and another state where the traffic fatalities since they legalized marijuana have increased by 30%. So, just,
This
we
is-
have to say this is like a panacea, but, we gotta see where it's going and do a truthful study, not, this is what I like and blah, 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 blah.
There
But
was
it's
a
great
long- there
because
was a
they're gonna put that
long-term-
clinic.
There was a long-term study that was done in California because they've had they've had medical marijuana since 1992 or thereabouts. And so they did a 10-year long-term study on the effects of medical marijuana dispensaries in the neighborhoods they go in. And they discovered that not only did it improve and bring in more businesses into the area, that it reduced crime because it was interesting because there's more eyes on the street, I guess. It reduced crime, it brought more businesses to the area, and it actually increased property values. So the concerns, that was the result of a long 10-year analysis.
In California.
In California.
California's got 60% more dispensaries than are licensed by the state.
Interesting.
I'll
I
give you
wonder
the,
how
ar-
that happened.
I'll give you the article on it. They're just every place,
Everywhere.
because they can't be policed.
It's gonna be good for the restaurants over there because they're opening up on 135th Street.
And Johnson and Wales may have a whole new line in culinary arts now.
They're open, where the old bank used to be on 135th Street in Biscayne?
County dispensaries.
There was a bank, City National, I believe. That's gone. I'm walking by there and I see that, and I called Debbie, and that's where they're gonna put their, medical marijuana. And
Well.
it's gonna be good for the Pinecrest Bakery over there.
Yes,
Move
it
to
will
ad-
be.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor, we have a motion. All, yep, second, let's go. See you all June 4th. You will be missed. Please do, send us some nice pictures.